Today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 things that smart SaaS founders should never do in their marketing. And specifically, I'm going to focus on content marketing. So if you're an early stage SaaS founder, so pre-seed, seed, series A, or if you're bootstrapped, kind of doing your own thing, self-funded, you're going to want to watch this video. And if you avoid these 5 mistakes, I promise you will be ahead of about 95, and I'd even go as far as to say 99% of your competitors. Now, who am I to talk to you about this stuff? My name's Tommy Clark. I'm founder of Compound Content Studio, a B2B content agency where we primarily serve early stage SaaS companies. Over the past 15 months, I've helped 30 plus SaaS founders launch a founder-led content motion on LinkedIn. And prior to that, I was head of social at Triple Whale, another Series A SaaS company in the e-commerce infrastructure space. So over the past 5-6 years, I've published about 30,000, probably way more than that, and that's pretty conservative, pieces of content. So I have a good idea of what works, what doesn't. I've seen how that's evolved over time. So I want to share some of those learnings with you today so you can avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made early on that I see a lot of my clients and my prospects make before they start working with us at Compound. Now, mistake number 1 is getting spread too thin. This is insanely common, and a lot of early stage founders are over ambitious with what they can do on the marketing side and with what their early marketing team, or really that one marketer that you have or contractor that you have doing all your content and everything in the marketing side, can do early on. So you don't want to spread yourself too thin, because the problem is, and this is one of the Compound core 5s, the 5 most common problems I see with SaaS companies in their marketing and content, is you just don't have the time in your calendar as an early stage founder to really nail more than 1 or 2 channels at a time. And again, you don't really have the resources on your team either. You might, if you're a seed stage company, or if you've raised your Series A, you'll have a marketing department. But even then, you're not going to have this massive marketing org. So you really want to focus your effort and their effort to get the most output out of your input. One of my favorite pieces of advice from Alex Hormozi is that you should focus on one channel, one offer, and one ICP until you're about $1 million in revenue, so $1 million in ARR if you're a SaaS company. And I really believe that. You can probably take that even further. And the good thing is, again, you don't even need to spread yourself that thin. You'll actually get better results. So you're not really sacrificing anything by choosing 1 or 2 channels and really narrowing your focus there. You'll actually achieve better outcomes with less stress, and your marketing department, or you, if you're an early stage founder and you are your marketing department, will again just feel a lot less overwhelmed, and the ROI will be better. Like an example of this would be if you look at Adam Robinson on LinkedIn. He scaled his SaaS company retention.com to over 20 million in ARR. He scaled his new SaaS company RB2B to over $1 million in ARR. I think it was in about like 16 or 18 weeks. And LinkedIn is the main channel that he uses for marketing. He has a Twitter or X account, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. He's starting to get more active on YouTube, but that's still pretty early. LinkedIn has been the main channel that has been responsible for that growth, especially for his new product, RB2B. And that just goes to show that you don't need a ton of channels to really nail your marketing. What I would recommend is if you are a B2B SaaS founder, especially in the early stage, just focus on LinkedIn. It's predictable. Your ICP is for sure on there. Like, don't try to go crack TikTok. It's not worth it at your stage. Maybe later, but even then, LinkedIn is the primary channel that I would focus on. Nail that, get to a cadence of 5 times per week. I'll get into that in a second. And then when you feel confident and you've really got that humming, maybe expand over to Twitter or to YouTube like I am right now. But just don't spread yourself too thin, because you don't have the team and you don't have the time. Now, mistake number 2 is sporadic posting cadence. The analogy I would like to use here is fitness or going to the gym. If you're trying to get into bodybuilder shape or even just beach body shape, you're not going to get jacked by going to the gym once a week. It's just not going to happen. You might see progress a bit slowly. If you're going from couch to like starting to get to the gym, you could go once a week and you'll see progress. But if you're really trying to build your best body possible, you're not going to get jacked going to the gym 1 time per week. You've got to go like at least 3 times, probably 4 or 5 times per week to really get your body in the best shape that you possibly can. Taking this back to content, I talk to so many CEOs of early stage SaaS companies who are like, I want to test LinkedIn content for 1 time per week or 2 times per month. And I'm just like, dude, that's not how it works. Nobody knows who you are, which is another one of the Compound core 5, the 5 most common problems that I see with SaaS marketing early on, is that nobody knows who you are. So if you're going to say that you're going to post 1 time per week or twice per month or whatever this absurdly low cadence is, you're not going to be getting in front of your audience enough for them to start to know who you are. Early on, you need to be slightly aggressive with your cadence and, more importantly, consistent with your output to get in front of your target audience more and more so they become more familiar with you and build trust. Eventually, you might earn the luxury of being able to be more sporadic with your posts. But even then, this is what I always tell my prospects is like, you're not trying to be a creative here. Like you're trying to use LinkedIn or content as a marketing channel for your company. If that is the case, you don't really have the luxury of being like, hey, I'm going to post for a week straight now and then go dark for a year and then come back. That's not the game you're playing. You're not an author who's just dropping a book and then dipping. You are a SaaS founder who's trying to use LinkedIn or maybe Twitter as a marketing channel for your company. So you don't have the luxury of being super inconsistent or posting infrequently. The flip side of that, kind of going back to the fitness analogy, is you're also not going to get super jacked by going to the gym for a week straight, doing 2-a-days, going super hard, like going balls to the wall, and then just disappearing for 3 months after that or 3 weeks after that and not going back to the gym at all. I see this a lot when founders try to commit to an overly ambitious content cadence of, hey, I'm going to post on LinkedIn twice per day. I'm going to post on Twitter like 5 times per day. I'm going to post a YouTube video a week. I'm going to do a podcast. And they start throwing the kitchen sink at their marketing motion. And as a result, they get spread too thin, going back to the first issue that we talked about. So you also don't want to go too far in that direction either. What I would recommend here, and I mentioned this cadence a few minutes ago, but post 5 times per week on LinkedIn from your founder's account. So if you are the founder, post 5 times per week from your account, whether you write it yourself or have someone on your team write it, 5 times per week on LinkedIn. Get comfortable with that. That is consistent enough of a cadence that you'll get in front of your target audience enough times to build familiarity, to build trust, and to build an audience on LinkedIn. The algorithm will favor you as well, but it's not so much that you're going to be overwhelmed. 5 high quality posts per week from your founder or CEO's account is enough to build a content presence on LinkedIn that will impact your revenue as a SaaS company. Now, as you get more comfortable with that, you could scale up to 7 times per week, so once per day generally. Or on the flip side, if you're like, hey, 5 times per week sounds great, but I just don't have the skill or capacity to do that right now, I would say 3 times per week is the absolute bare minimum. But in most cases, and this is what we do with all our clients, we ramp them up to 5 times per week on LinkedIn. Now, mistake number 3, and before we get into that, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button down below. And also let me know what your biggest struggle with marketing your SaaS company is. I'm always looking for content ideas to turn into YouTube videos and guides like this. So let me know in the comments below. But getting into mistake number 3 here, or the third thing that smart SaaS founders should never do in their content, is having no differentiation. And I see this a lot, especially in B2B SaaS. It is so sterile. Like when you think of that Buzz Lightyear meme with like tons of Buzz Lightyear figurines on the shelf, no differentiation, they all look the same, they're all clones of each other. That is how most SaaS marketing looks, because people are so afraid to take a hard stance on an industry point of view or attack an enemy or something like that. What I want you to realize is blending in on social and in content and your marketing in general gets you nowhere. No one is going to remember you. No one is going to become a huge fan. No one's going to hate you. And the truth is, if you take a hard stance and actually focus on differentiating yourself, you're probably going to have some haters. And for some reason, SaaS founders are like terrified of that. I get it. It's uncomfortable. I'm sure there are some people that disagree with the way that I think about content, but that's fine. I'm not going to let that keep me from scaling my business and scaling my agency. And you shouldn't let that keep you from scaling your SaaS company. That said, you also don't need to go crazy and be super polarizing to have differentiation on social. The key is you just have to have a point of view that is unique to your company. Because differentiation will drive demand for your SaaS. Again, if you blend in, you're not going to get anywhere. An example of a company that's done this really well is Zenlane and their founder, Jimmy Kim. So Jimmy was an early client of Compound. We helped him launch his social presence on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and now he's sort of running the show and doing his own content, which is honestly a success story for us, and I love that. And one thing that I love about what Jimmy is doing with Zenlane is he's not afraid to poke the bear and really differentiate himself on social by taking a hard stance. And in their case, they've gone to the extreme a bit and really are attacking the industry incumbent that is Klaviyo in the e-commerce ESP space, and it's worked really well for them. It's allowed them to garner attention, and because they've taken this hard stance and really actually picked an enemy, it's allowed them to make noise on social and start to get more of these brands that are kind of sick and tired of what Klaviyo is doing on the pricing side and his other product stuff to move over to their product. Now, in your case, you don't necessarily have to pick an enemy that is a company. Another example, and I've cited them quite a bit, actually have a full deep dive on their marketing and content strategy on my channel, but I think Beehive has also done this quite well in the creator ESP space. Funny enough, these are both email marketing companies, but Beehive is actually the platform I use to write my newsletter. So subscribe below if you haven't already. But they've done a good job, not necessarily going after individual competitors, but there is this sort of like Beehive versus ConvertKit or Kit, if that's, I think, their new branding on social, mostly on Twitter and LinkedIn. So again, it allows them to make noise and really stand out. And Tyler, their CEO, really isn't afraid to, for lack of a better way to describe it, have a personality on social and not be this like sterile corporate figure. So if you're able to actually share your real opinions, which if you're starting a SaaS company, there's likely some industry defining point of view that drove you to start this company, some problem that you were sick of, some belief that you hold strongly that is informing your product. Use social to amplify that, and you will start to build a community of super fans. The thing you want to avoid is being super sterile and overly relying on like boring industry white papers that nobody cares about, and falling into the trap of wanting an authoritative but casual tone of voice. Yeah, so does literally every other SaaS company. How else are you going to differentiate your content on social, whether it's your tone of voice, whether you're going to pick an enemy, whether you are going to do some more like guerrilla marketing and stunts like Anti-Metal with their pizza stunt they did that actually drove over $1 million in ARR, which that's a whole different case study in and of itself. I wrote a newsletter on that. But my point is, you don't want to be bland and sterile on social, especially if you're a SaaS company. Consumer brands get this. I think SaaS companies in B2B are a bit farther behind, but they're starting to come around to it, and the ones that do will win. Now, this is kind of related to mistake number 4 or idea number 4 to avoid if you want to be a smart SaaS founder with your marketing, and that's speaking in corporate tone of voice. A lot of the SaaS founders that I see on social and a lot of my prospects before they kind of get up to speed come in and they want to speak in this voice that kind of resembles someone presenting a corporate HR training. And it's like, do you think that somebody is going to see this on their timeline and think, I want to read this and this sounds super engaging? Probably not. Think about how you approach those corporate HR trainings. You click through until you get to the end and never have to review it ever again. You don't want your content to come across the same way. You want to have some sort of personality in your content. And again, one of the super common requests that I hear for tone of voice from clients when they're first onboarding, again, before we run them through our process, is, oh, we want to sound casual but authoritative. Yes, so does literally every other B2B SaaS founder on the face of the earth. How else are you going to differentiate? Going back to mistake number 3, one way to do that is to just speak like a human. And this is going to vary from founder to founder. Like if you read my writing, I write the way that I speak. I don't try to force anything. If you write more casual or if you speak more casual, let that show up in your writing. If you are more buttoned up and maybe a little bit more corporate, that's fine. The biggest thing is that your writing and your video content on LinkedIn should accurately reflect your personality as a founder. You don't want to put on a character per se. One tactic that I love for this, and this is like an age-old copywriting tactic, but when you write your copy, read it out loud. And the way it reads out loud should feel like you can actually say it in a conversation, or like use the copy you wrote as a script for a YouTube video or a LinkedIn video. It should feel very natural. If you end up on a point where you kind of trip over some words, you're like, yeah, that sounds kind of awkward or corporate, that's a sign that you might want to revise that. This is something I do with all of my content. This is something I advise our writing team to do with our clients' content. Like, hey, does this sound natural? Does this sound like the founder that we're writing for? Or in your case, does this sound like me in my writing? If it doesn't, you'll want to work to refine your tone of voice more and more. One other tactic that I would recommend here to start to understand what you want your tone of voice to be, because if you're not really into writing or kind of getting into this for the first time, you might not even know what you want your tone of voice to be like. But what I would do is pick 3 to 5 LinkedIn accounts, specifically if we're talking B2B SaaS, 3 to 5 LinkedIn accounts from founders that you want to emulate, or that you like the way that they speak on social, or like the way that they speak in their content. And you'll want to model your tone of voice in your writing after theirs. Again, you want this to evolve at a certain point to really be your tone of voice. But just like when you're starting a business, you want to look for just other successful people in that industry and what are they doing that worked? What are they doing that didn't work? You want to do the same thing with your writing and content and build this sort of swipe file or inspiration file of other founders and other content creators that you really admire and want to emulate their tone of voice. And that'll help you as you start to get more reps and develop your own and fall out of this trap of speaking in corporate voice. And this is also a warning against content by committee. Whenever there are more than 2 people, or really more than 1 person who's responsible for approving a piece of content, it almost always devolves into corporate HR voice, like without fail. If you have like the content marketing manager and your founder and your head of legal and your head of HR and all these different people involved in approving a piece of LinkedIn content, which is not that high risk to begin with, you're going to end up with this Frankenstein together abomination that does not resemble your tone of voice whatsoever and does not get any sort of engagement. So if you're writing your content, write your own content, or if you're working with a content partner, keep it focused and don't bring in a ton of people to approve a single piece. Work directly with the writer on your account to refine your tone of voice. You want it to be specific to you and natural to you. Again, the key here isn't that you have to be unhinged or have this super loud or boisterous personality. You don't have to go after industry competitors directly like Jimmy is doing with Senlane and Klaviyo, or like what Adam Robinson has done recently with going after 6 Sense. You don't have to take that approach. What I am saying is that you need to have a personality, which I know you have. It can be tricky for some SaaS founders, but I believe that you have a personality that can come across in your content. So please, let's just banish the HR corporate tone of voice. Now, the fifth thing that smart SaaS founders never do in their marketing is miss-targeting their ICP. I see this one a lot, and you don't want an audience of broke people who are never gonna buy your stuff. It sounds crude, but it's true. And you see this a lot when founders will maybe hire a ghostwriting agency and go super top of funnel. And this isn't bashing an agency. I love agencies. I have an agency. But a lot of times when they outsource their content, one of the common plays they'll run is this sort of like super general business oriented content. And it sort of builds this fluffy audience of people, again, who don't have the money to buy your product. Like, you're not selling a $17 PDF. You're selling a high ticket SaaS product in most cases. And every single SaaS founder I talk to is like, I want to go up market. Cool. If that's the case, you don't want to attract a super broad audience. You want to make sure that your content is speaking specifically to your ICP. Another thing to think about here, especially in SaaS, is this whole building in public thing. I think building in public can be a great play for getting customers, getting investors, and recruiting high quality employees. But you want to be careful with it, especially if you're trying to use it to get customers. Building in public can work really well if your audience is other SaaS founders. I'll get into an example of this in a second. But if you're trying to sell into people who aren't other SaaS founders or other SaaS go-to-market folks, building in public and sharing your journey as a SaaS founder and having that be like the main pillar of your content is probably not the way to go. I think there's still a lot of value in sharing company updates. One style of post I see do really well consistently over and over again is sort of monthly company update style of post. But if your core audience, your core ICP is not other SaaS founders, building in public kind of isn't the way to go. A lot of times the best way to attract your ICP in your content is when you are or you were your ICP at some point. So this is why building in public for SaaS founders works so well to attract other SaaS founders. Now, one example of a founder who's posting on LinkedIn who kind of was their own ICP at some point was this guy named Austin Hughes. So Austin was previously at Ramp. He led their growth product team, and outbound and their go-to-market was a good part or a big part of what he did at Ramp. And now his new company, Unify, sells into other go-to-market folks and folks in that part of a SaaS organization. So he has a lot of experience like as his own ICP. So it translates into content that performs quite well. It actually speaks specifically to that type of person. So even if it doesn't go super viral all the time, it does a great job of speaking very directly to that ICP. And as a result, they've been able to drive a lot of inbound demand, and really all of their inbound is being driven through his LinkedIn account. And on top of that, a bonus, he's able to leverage credibility from working at Ramp, which is a obviously super well-known company in the B2B SaaS ecosystem. So he's able to leverage that credibility into his current content with his current company. Another example of being your own ICP, kind of another company in this space, but Adam Robinson, I mentioned before, if you're in B2B SaaS on LinkedIn, you've probably seen his content. But with his new company, RB2B, again, he is his ICP because he's trying to target other SaaS folks and other SaaS go-to-market folks. Before launching RB2B with retention.com, I mentioned, I think we worked with him back in late 2022 going into 2023, and we helped him launch his LinkedIn presence from about 0 to 22,000 followers on LinkedIn. And he had a lot of success on platform. But one thing that we ran into actually was that the product at the time, the retention.com, his original product, was selling into e-commerce brands and D2C marketers and founders. And that type of building in public content was hitting for SaaS people, but it wasn't necessarily hitting that right audience for retention.com. And then also like the D2C e-commerce content that he was posting was doing well. It was doing okay, but like Adam's not an e-commerce guy. Like Adam's not a D2C founder. He hasn't run a consumer brand. So there was just this like spark that was missing from that type of content that was very apparently there in the SaaS oriented content. So what Adam did was he went and started a new company pretty much in the B2B SaaS ecosystem where he has a lot more experience and he pretty much is his own ICP, which allows him to speak more clearly to those pain points and topics that are going to resonate with that audience. Now, if you have the luxury of being your own ICP, or maybe you were at some point. So the example I always use here is if you are selling into B2B salespeople and you were previously a VP of sales at a SaaS unicorn, you have a lot of credibility that you can tie into that. Or like we talked about with Austin, he used to work at Ramp on the growth product team, like running the go-to-market, and now he's building a company in the go-to-market space. So he has credibility from a well-known company that he can apply to his new venture. And he has a really strong network that is engaging with his content on LinkedIn and driving a lot of inbound. If you don't have that luxury of being your own ICP at some point, what you want to do is map your content to your ICP's pain points. So one example of a type of content that is just evergreen and works well for this is sharing customer anecdotes. If you're on meetings with customers or on calls with customers or prospects, share the pain points they're dealing with, share how your product fixes those pain points and share value around that. And it might take a little bit longer, especially if you don't have that inherent credibility. That's just one of the realities of building on social is if you're not starting from a place of having a network and having credibility with a specific audience, you're going to have to build trust. Like that's the whole point of posting content. Going back to what we talked about way at the beginning of this video, that's why you want to post consistently. Because if you're coming into, say, the B2B go-to-market space and you don't have specific experience working in that type of role and you're trying to sell into that customer, who are they or who are you to expect that ICP to believe you and trust you right out the gate? You need to make deposits into that account of goodwill or account of trust with your content. So you want to map that content to topics and ideas that that audience will specifically resonate with. And if you're truly green in an industry, so you don't have a lot of experience in an industry that you're trying to sell into, just document what you're learning from other experts. So if you read a podcast or listen to a podcast in that space, or you read a book or an article, or you subscribe to a newsletter, curate those thoughts. The key with that, and I can make a whole other video on this topic with those curation style of posts, you don't want to just copy paste those thoughts as if they're your own. You want to document like, hey, this is what I'm learning about and this is my take on the subject. But ideally, if you're building a SaaS company in the space, you have some experience or there was some origin story that drove you to start a company and build a product in this specific industry. So there's probably something that you can pull as far as previous experience or credibility. You might not be a perfect fit as far as like being your ICP or having been your ICP, but it happens a lot. My point here is kind of just bringing this all together for point number 5 is you want to be sure you're speaking to the right person. Or if you're just making sure the topics or ideas that you're posting about align with that ICP, you want to make sure that you don't go too broad with your content and build up this fluffy audience who's never going to buy from you. The way I like to think about this is building out a content funnel. So having your top of funnel content, which is a bit more broad, and those might be those founder stories or more general business content. And that's fine. I like to include that about 10 to 20% of the time. I don't want to over index in that direction for the reason we just talked about. You're going to have your bottom of funnel content, which is your product related stuff like case studies, feature highlights, stuff like that, which also is totally needed, but you don't want to over index in that direction either because you're going to struggle to build an audience that way. And you're going to have your middle of funnel content, which is your more targeted content that speaks specifically to your ICP, but also is value oriented and isn't super sales pitchy. So this is going to make up the bulk of your content strategy because you can build an audience off of it and it speaks specifically to your ICP. So you might grow an audience objectively, like the numbers, at a slower rate than if you were to only focus on top of funnel content because it's just not going to get as much engagement on platform. But by focusing heavily on middle of funnel content, you're going to make sure you're getting the right engagement because people who engage with content about those topics are going to be your ICP. So if you want to learn more about how to build out this entire motion from scratch, I have a masterclass on my channel. It's over an hour long that goes through the entire process of starting a founder-led content motion on LinkedIn. So if you want to check that out, I'll toss it up on screen right now. I appreciate you watching this one. Avoid these 5 mistakes. You'll be in a great spot. Watch that video next, launch your content motion, and you'll be in a fantastic spot to generate leads for your SaaS. So I'll see you over there, and yeah, we'll talk soon.